What's going on, everybody? Zack Rosenblatt back here with Darryl Slater for the latest episode of the Talk is Cheap podcast. A lot to discuss. Since last time we guys saw you, the Giants have lost twice in pretty terrible fashion. They're 0-3, as you all will well know, and the things appear to be coming undone in the way that they've been talking to us in press conferences. And I mean, what do you make of where the Giants are at right now? We couldn't even have predicted it going this poorly to start the season, right?
Yeah, I think people, when we looked at it and said, this is a team that was obviously still rebuilding and still in the process of getting back to being a playoff contender. But you look at this early schedule and thought, Denver, Washington, Atlanta, there were some winnable games there. And to start 0-3 in that stretch is just, especially with how bad the Falcons look, to lose that game at home on Eli Manning's number retirement day, it was just the absolute worst case scenario for the Giants, especially considering how they lost it. And so now you're looking at a team that is reeling early in the season for the second straight year. And yeah, Joe Judge was able to get it righted last year and contend in a bad division and be in it until the end and finish 6-10 and inspire some hope. But he's going to have to pull a rabbit out of his hat here to have a similar feeling, I think, at the end of this year. And it's really a tall order to turn this thing around, especially considering the situation they're in. Just even if you look at the offensive line, to say nothing of Blake Martinez and all these other areas of attrition that they've had.
Yeah, and we'll get into all that in a second. But again, this goes back to, I think we talked about this maybe before the Week 2 game. If you had said before the season that on their schedule they would have played Teddy Bridgewater, Taylor Heineke, and then a broken down Matt Ryan, who he clearly couldn't even throw the ball down the field the other day, and they lost to all three of those guys, and now. So they're 0-3. At worst, they needed to be at least 1-2 coming out of that stretch. They're 0-3. Now they play the Saints on the road on Sunday. It's going to be a Saints crowd, which is already maybe the toughest environment to play in. They haven't been there in 2 years. The fans haven't been in the stadium in 2 years because they started the season in Jacksonville because of the hurricane. So they're coming out of a hurricane situation. They're all amped up, and the Giants are just an absolute mess. Their offensive line, we probably should get into that. Their offensive line is full of guys that weren't here a month ago. Their center, it was exactly a month ago they acquired Billy Price from the Bengals, and then he wasn't even able to come right away because he's seems to be he's unvaccinated. But the schedule coming up, I'll just run through it real quick because I think I saw someone who thinks they have the hardest schedule and remaining schedule in the NFL in general. But so they've at the Saints, at the Cowboys. The Cowboys look like the clear best team in this division. The Rams at home, the Panthers at home. The Panthers are undefeated. The Chiefs on the road on Monday Night Football, and then the Raiders in Week 9 at home, and the Raiders are also undefeated, I believe.
Yeah, so you have
that's leading into the bye, and then you have Tampa Bay coming out of the bye Monday night at home. Bad teams always beat teams that they're not supposed to. The odds of that, I wouldn't predict them being 0-10 after Week 11. That seems insane, but on paper, you'd think it's possible at least.
There are certainly games here where this could snowball. I think that's absolutely the case, because even if you look at the games like you had alluded to, they were against teams that appeared winnable, beatable, I should say, whether that's the Panthers or the Raiders.
The Panthers and Raiders are two games before the season. You're those are wins,
right? And now the Panthers have beaten
bad teams.
They also beat the Saints, but they beat the Jets and
the Texans.
The Texans, thank you. I suppose it's a winnable game for the Giants, but they're not going to win any games if their defense plays.
I think the only game I would bet they're favored for the rest of the year is at home against the Eagles.
Now, I should say I think that they're not going to go winless.
But, yeah, I know. but the fact that we even have to have that discussion kind of tells you that they needed to So the thing is, they've lost these close games, but the problem is when you lose to the Falcons in a close game, that you don't really get the credit for that, So why should we believe they can beat any of these teams coming up? There's no reason to believe it until we see it happen.
The next 2 weeks could be really bad.
Yeah.
I think you're looking at a situation on Sunday that it just doesn't. There's no way you can look at that and say, this is a game that you give the Giants much of a chance to win in New Orleans against that Saints defensive front with a patchwork offensive line. It just has disastrous potential on so many levels on Sunday. And then they go down and play a Cowboys team that, like you said, looks like the clear favorite in the NFC East. It's hard to imagine that this team to me, I could see 2 losses very easily these next 2 weeks. Then you're looking at 0-2 for the second straight year, and the honeymoon is over for Joe Judge. I mean, that's clear. It's over now.
Yeah, there are 2 things that I wanted to get into, and that's number 1, when or if they should start firing some people, and number 2, it's the whole Joe Judge discussion. Do you want to start with Joe Judge?
Sure. Yeah. No.
Just for context, I mean, I talked about this probably on this podcast a bunch of times, and over the last year a bunch of times. Like last year when they were 1-7, he still had a near universal approval rating among fans. They believed in his vision and all that stuff. In this offseason, they still all loved him. Before week 1, they still all loved him. They loved everything he says. He sounds like a football coach. Like he sounds like what you want a football coach to sound like, the things he says, the things he preaches. And then they go out on Sunday and they don't really practice what he preaches. They're undisciplined. They make a lot of bad mistakes. He'll say he's not scared to go for it on 4th, but all the evidence is that he's scared to go for it on 4th down. And one situation, and he's the one that makes these decisions on 4th down, they punted it on 4th and 4 on the Falcons' 39-yard line. His defense was about field position, playing the field position game. Why are they playing the field position game down 7-6 in the second quarter for a team that is not good? The Giants are not good enough to do that. Like and you're at home. I never understood for a bad team to play conservatively. I've never understood that. Like, what do you have to lose? You guys are losing games anyway. Take risks anyway. Like, so you have all of that, and then I don't think it's starting to feel like, maybe if he wouldn't admit this, obviously, that he's starting to feel the heat, the pressure, the criticism. Fans have turned on him. Like, if you tweet anything about Joe Judge, everybody's like telling him to stop talking. Like, it's gotten to that point real quick. Like, I would not have predicted that by week 4. And then on Sunday, after the loss, there was this weird moment at the end of the press conference where he's walking off the podium and somebody in the crowd is like saying something, irrelevant. I think he heard it as somebody talking smack, was my impression. Judge turns around and he says to the media, "We're going to be all right, guys. We'll be all right," which was just a very weird thing to say to the media, as if like he needed to like say to himself or something, is what it felt like. And then you fast forward to Wednesday, he comes out for his press conference the day before. Golden Tate, our old buddy, had like said some things about him on Good Morning Football, where he said how his conditioning methods don't work clearly, and maybe that's why some guys hurt their hamstring the other day. There's some reports about maybe players believing that. So he comes out with a sheet of paper that he looks at before he's even like asked a question. Like somebody asks something kind of related but not directly. And then he's like, "I know what the next question is going to be." And then he has the sheet of paper and he starts listing off all the ways his conditioning worked last year. I don't know who gave him that information, how quickly it came together. I'm imagining some like quality control guy like banging away on the keyboard or something, and how to prove it or whatever. But so he goes through all these things, which is again a very weird thing to do, and it kind of shows the sign of somebody who feels like he needs to. I'm right, guys. You're
justify,
wrong.
Yeah.
And then he also he gets really defensive about not being fearful of going for it on 4th down, which again, like he hasn't shown a willingness to do that in situations where he should. But like what do you think about the way it's all devolved into this? Like I don't think it could have been in a worse spot right now. It's probably his approval rating has never been lower.
For sure. 6-13, and fans are starting to expect some results here. This is a team that's spent in the offseason. The roster is better. So like last year, the excuse is always, he's not calling the plays, and he's still not. The roster is not good enough. Okay, but the roster is better this year, so they should be better, and they should be beating bad teams, and they're not. And I think he's going to be a consistent guy with his message. He's one of those type of guys. A lot of these coaches are. And so I think for a fan base that sees these results constantly, and even going back before him, all the misery that the Giants have been through, Jets-like misery, I've been Freudian slip there, since their last winning season in 2016, it's just an accumulation of just frustration among this fan base, and people are just sick of it, and they're tired of hearing Joe Judge after losses try to spin positive all the time and not criticize anyone and not acknowledge how frustrating and angering these losses are to I'm sure he feels that they are, but I feel like maybe he thinks he has to keep this stable.
Well, yeah, his whole act
facade.
His whole act of like saying there are a lot of good things from that game. Like he's always like nobody wants to hear that.
And
anymore.
the same lines with the fans, tough place to play, blue collar, all those things about New York, whatever. As if everyone here works in like a textile mill. No, it's whatever. But that's just my cynicism. But if that's his shtick and that's his line, and I think if they're winning, sure, people are on board with it. He's General Patton. If they're losing, he's Dan Quayle. Or whatever the analogy would be for ineptitude and just someone who just bumbling. So. I think he's a guy who's going to stay consistent with, and so it just depends on the results. And if they're winning, people are going to be fine with that. And if they're not, it's going to become a tired act very quickly, because a lot of what he puts out there is that football guy, football coach persona, and maybe that might just be him. But I think it's hard to say it's an act because maybe it's not an act, but it is wearing thin. With a fan base that just wants to see some darn results after a while and has not seen it, and the it feels like he's on his heels a little bit with justifying some of these decisions. But yeah, I mean, winning cures all. But like I just said, it's hard to imagine them winning the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, and I think everybody, not just us, but I think we've talked a bit in the past about how his methods, it was always going to be everybody would love him if they were winning, and if they're losing, then you could see it kind of spiraling, and that's kind of what's happening now. I mean, we saw in week 2 Kenny Galladay yelling on the sideline, Kadarius Toney, subtweeting on Instagram, and Jabril Peppers has very clearly looked upset with his role, and you just hear rumblings about this team and how things are looking behind the scenes right now, and it's not great. And if you had asked me before the season, what percentage would you put on Joe Judge getting fired after year 2, I would have put it, single digits, 5% less. I just didn't see it. But if they have an absolutely disastrous season, maybe they don't only win 3 games, or because they have been close to winning a few times, and you think maybe they get lucky a few times and finally get through. But if this team goes 3-14 or 4 and I don't know what, if they get 4 wins, it has to be a discussion, especially if you move on from Dave Gettleman, which I think is a foregone conclusion at this point. You would think, you never know with John Mara. There's the whole idea that a new GM is going to want his own coach in theory, unless Joe Judge is the one picking the GM, I guess. But where do you stand on that part of job security, I guess?
I still think it's really unlikely.
Yeah.
I mean, they gave him a 6-year contract, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Or maybe I'm getting that confused with Joe Douglas. But either way, no matter what contract they gave him, John Mara said this from the very beginning in 2020 in January. Talked to him about this, and he said, we're going to be patient with this guy. He's a young guy. He's late 30s, first rookie head coach. They went the decisive route and got rid of Pat Shurmur after 2 years. Honestly, I would still be really, really shocked if they fired Joe Judge after 2 years, just because of everything John Mara has said. Mm-hmm. Now, there's a number of different ways they could go with the GM. Presuming they get rid of Dave Gettleman, they could go internal and promote Kevin Abrams. I know people want them to think outside the box and all that, but here's the thing: John Mara is not just going to. Now, I'm not saying what's right or what's wrong. I do think they should think outside the box, but I'm just saying what's most likely. Just because you want it to happen doesn't mean he's going to do it. I mean, The guy is, how old is John Mara?
All we can do is point at evidence, yeah.
He's 70-something years old. He's not going to necessarily change his full approach and go and hire someone completely from the outside. I think it's still possible they could promote Kevin Abrams from within.
Well, and they also hired that guy, Kyle O'Brien, from the Lions this offseason, and he's in the organization already, too.
Yep,
yeah.
and so they could, so I guess he's a quasi, outside voice, but I could see that. I mean, Joe Judge has plenty of power, and certainly he would have input on who gets the GM title, even if that person is not, a full-power GM. Mm-hmm. So all of those things, I could see that happening. A full-on house cleaning where they fire the GM and the coach, and they hire a GM from the outside to hire a new coach, I still think that's really unlikely. I mean, just because of everything John Mara has said about showing patience with Joe Judge and knowing that he's going to have to learn on the job and all that stuff. Now, I'm not saying what's right. Should they? I don't think. Right now it's 0-3. There's so many different ways this thing could go. If they win 3 games, should they fire him? I don't. It just all depends on how those losses happen.
What a lot of what it goes back to is John Mara has his message all offseason was he's tired of losing. It's time for us to win. They went and spent all this money on all these guys to fix the offense. The offense still isn't scoring. So at what point does John put his money where his mouth is and say he's tired of losing, so what are you going to do about it? And to that point, so when or if do you think Dave Gettleman gets fired, and when or if do you think Jason Garrett gets fired.
I don't know what the point would be in firing Gettleman right now.
Yeah,
the one tipping point is the trade deadline.
Yeah, if they decide they want to be sellers, which I don't know
Right.
if they have a history of being a team that is willing to do that. So
What are you going to get? Evan Ingram for a bag of balls
that's
for
what I'm
Evan
saying.
Ingram?
They waited too long to trade Ingram.
Yeah,
at this
so
point,
who's tradable on your roster that you're going to get anything for anyway? So that's the one thing that they run into. I think they play it out with Gettleman, and then he retires / is fired at the end of the year. I think that's the most likely scenario. Jason Garrett, obviously, you don't really see in-season GM changes that much because there's not really an advantage to it.
Yeah.
Because it's not like
if you're hiring somebody from outside, you need to request interviews. And,
right.
Yeah.
That's not happening.
And
during
nobody's
the
going to
season.
let you do that.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense. So, of course, you could ditch a coordinator in season, give a new voice in there a chance to help develop your young quarterback. So yeah, and give that guy a chance. Like if it's Freddie Kitchens, right, to be the OC, give him a chance to audition for the full-time job, and maybe they go forward with that, because it's not like. Again, I think it's an very outside chance you fire the head coach. So Joe Judge will get to see Freddie Kitchens. How does he do? Maybe they keep him. Maybe they go outside. So, yeah, I think you could be looking at a situation here where the bye week is the tipping point for Jason Garrett. Usually, geez, they still have a lot more games before the bye week, though, don't they?
Yeah, it's all those games I listed. Yeah.
Jeez Louise. I mean, you got 6 more games before the bye week. I mean,
so it's tough to fire him in between. Where
does the?
I guess they have a Monday night game with Chiefs, so there's an extra day in theory.
I think you got to look at the Rams at home, Carolina at home. You got back-to-back home games. Carolina is probably a beatable team, so could you fire him going before the Kansas City game? It
seems more likely they wait till the bye week if they do.
Probably, yeah, and it's a week 10 bye, but I mean, you're not
unless
changing
of
your whole
course,
system.
unless of course it's a complete disaster over these next.
I mean, a lot of it will be punitive, right? I mean, like, what do you accomplish firing? That's what people ask, right? What do you accomplish? It's a pound of flesh for an angry fan base. Is what it is. It's punitive more than anything. Usually, don't see a lot of. It's not like hockey where they change a coach mid-season, the guy goes on to win the Stanley Cup or something. Usually, don't see a lot of tangible results from an in-season coordinator or coach change.
Well, I mean, because you're not going to hire externally, so you're just going to promote somebody who's just going to use the scheme you already have in place and maybe call plays differently, which I think would be the appeal of a Freddie Kitchens or whatever. But I mean, those are the two big storylines that I think are going to be over the course of the season. I mean, we should talk about the offensive line a little bit. We alluded to it. You and I are working on something that's going to come out probably tomorrow, so we won't spoil it too much. But like this, just to give you an idea of what this offensive line looks like right now. So Matt Parrott, they don't trust enough to play at all. So he's not playing at right tackle, whereas Nate Solder is the entrenched starting right tackle. Matt Parrott has been getting some reps at guard in practice. He's never played guard before. Billy Price is the locked-in starting center, especially now that Nick Gates is out for the year with a broken leg. Shane Lemieux's out for the year with a knee injury at left guard, so they had been starting Ben Bredeson, who they also just acquired a month ago. He's injured. He has a hand injury, so now their only options at left guard this week, assuming they don't move Billy Price over, which I guess is possible, but then you're changing centers again. Who's your center? So they have a guy, Wes Martin, they just signed off the practice squad of Washington earlier this week. They have Matt Skura, who's been on the practice squad this season, is a career center. He has played right guard. So in theory, I guess you could put Will Hernandez at left guard, but he hasn't really shown very good at either side. They have Jonathan Harrison on the practice squad, who they just signed last week. He was in training camp with them all year. He's mostly been a center in the NFL, but he has some experience at guard. And they have Matt Parrott, who I just said has never played guard. And so you have that. You have Andrew Thomas, who's playing really well. He's kind of been the anchor of the unit, but everybody else has been kind of a question mark. And it's kind of funny that it worked out that way, where he was the biggest problem last year. But I think that it's hard to even describe. Like that, I just said so many things. This offensive line couldn't be a bigger mess right now. And they just did not, I guess you can't plan for injuries, but it's not like the guys that were, start like Shane Lemieux they were relying on, and he wasn't very good last year anyway. Like, it's just an absolute disaster.
They could stink at left guard even if Lemieux had remained healthy. That's entirely possible. It's not like you could fall back on the argument that they lost, a Pro Bowl left guard. They didn't. I mean, they lost a very stable center in Nick Gates, and that was a significant loss. Billy Price is a clear downgrade there, and what do you expect? Because I mean, this is a line that gets back to, after they cut Kevin Zeiler, Dave Gettleman and Joe Judge. Let's loop him in. And Joe Judge, because he has significant say in this organization. They didn't go out and get a significant guard. Okay, so now you're looking at a situation where your starters are Will Hernandez and Shane Lemieux, who might just be backup quality players. So then the guys behind them are even worse than those guys. So now you're looking at, they Kenny Wiggins and all this revolving door that they've had at guard, and Bredesen and all this. And so if you had brought in a guard, a well-regarded, proven, however you put it, guard, then you're looking at a situation, okay, you got another piece to use. You got a little more wiggle room there. Now they had no wiggle room. Now they were
scrambling,
yes, totally scrambling. So you bring in a guard, you say, all right, Will Hernandez, you're now a backup. Or and he would be a perfectly fine backup.
Yeah.
Then if that newcomer hypothetically got hurt, you could say, look, we tried. We brought in a guard. Now we got to go to Will Hernandez. At least he has starts. Okay. But the now we've got to go to is like a disaster situation right now because they didn't address this. I mean, it's just a complete domino effect of all the things that Dave Gettleman has done. He cut Kevin Zeitler because of these, because he needed
money to get receivers and all that stuff.
Get receivers and to re-sign Leonard Williams, and he needed the money to get receivers because Golden Tate didn't work out. And I mean, it's just
trying to fix a mistake that you made because you messed up previously making a mistake.
I think I texted you this last night. It's like a Breaking Bad season, right? Like you're constantly like trying to patch up holes in the dam, and each one's getting worse. And next thing you know, Dave Gettleman's running around midfield in his tighty whities. And people will get that if you've seen Breaking Bad, but don't. Excuse the indelicate metaphor.
Well, and I said this to you too. It kind of felt like perfect full circle that Golden Tate is the one that kind of caused this firestorm when he's supposed to be in year 3 of his contract. Instead, he's on Good Morning Football, making Dave Gettleman's coach look worse.
Yep, yeah. I mean, as if Golden Tate wasn't enough of a mess when he was with the Giants,
exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, that offensive line, and that was supposed to be Dave Gettleman's baby. That was the thing. I think I was reading the quotes from his introductory press conference. He said the Giants are going to work their fannies off to get the offensive line fixed.
I mean, he'll never live down the hog mollies.
No, never. Oh, yeah, that's brought up constantly.
Among the many quotes he'll never live down.
Yeah. Nope. Just decision after decision on the offensive line that just did not work. It's funny. I don't even think we could criticize Rob Sale at this point because look at what he's had to work with. He's talked about, you have a new guy coming in every week that you have to get ready. You have to get him on the iPad. You have to, get him ingratiated, and he deserves credit for getting Andrew Thomas fixed. I mean, it's early, but he looks fixed. He's not making mistakes, even if maybe he's never going to be a star left tackle. But Rob Sale's done a good job with him, and then the rest of the group has just been shuffling in and out. Will Hernandez still doesn't look very good. Matt Parrott is kind of a disaster if he's a 3rd-round pick that can't beat out Nate Solder. It's just hard to make 2 cents of this situation.
I think that, this goes back years. The Giants' offensive line has struggled for years, and you can get by with an average offensive line. Maybe 3/5 of your line is good, and the other 2 aren't very good. And it's funny looking back. The Giants in 2011 according to PFF, had the worst pass blocking rating in the NFL. They won the Super Bowl. Now they didn't have a great regular season necessarily that year. Well, no, they won 11 games, right? So
yeah.
Okay, so yeah. So look, you don't have that. Just shows you don't have to be incredible, but yeah. I mean, it's been a long time since they've had a really good offensive line, and one of the reasons for that is I uncovered this little nugget the other day. They have not drafted and re-signed. Now, Nick Gates wasn't a draft pick, so I get that, and but they have not drafted and given a second contract to an offensive lineman since Will Beatty. 2009 they drafted him. So yeah. So that just gets to the fact of stability or lack of stability on the line, and it's the position group where you need the stability the most.
Yeah, and so we can spin this ahead to the Saints game. So, I mean, the Saints have a very good defensive front, and so you're going to have Billy Price playing in a very loud environment. You're going to have a left guard who has never started at left guard for the Giants, and they're going to have to block Cam Jordan and Marcus Davenport and all these guys. Elsewhere, so we probably talk about some of the injury stuff. You alluded to Blake Martinez earlier. He tore his ACL. He's out for the year. He's probably one of the 5 most important players on this team. He has the green dot in his helmet. He's the one that calls the plays in there. He's gone for the year. Tate Crowder has to play in there. Tate Crowder, he's shown flashes of being talented, but, he struggles covering running backs, and they have Alvin Kamara this week. So that's like a real problem area with not an easy solution. And then wide receiver, Sterling Shepard and Darius Slayton both injured their hamstrings on Sunday. Kenny Galladay's still not 100% healthy. His hip is hurt. Though they say it's different than his injury from last year. So they almost have no choice in theory but to play Kadarius Toney more. He played more last week. They still only targeted him 3 times or 2 times, 3. Colin Johnson wound up being like the Kenny Galladay in the offense, which, no few people listening to this probably ever heard of Colin Johnson before last week. How do you see this wide receiver situation playing out against the Saints, who have pretty good secondary too?
Yeah, not good.
Yeah.
Not good. You're asking Kadarius Toney to be, more ready than he probably is to contribute significantly, and that's, some of that's not his fault. He's just not a polished receiver. Some of it, is bad luck, whether it's the injuries he's dealt with. But the bottom line is he's not in a position to contribute significantly right now, and that's why they're not playing him. But, if you're without your slot receiver and Sterling Shepard, they're going to have no choice but to probably place Toney significant snaps in the slot and hope that he just looks more ready than he in reality is, and plays up to the occasion. So, I just, maybe they can find a way to use his athleticism, but that's your hope there, is you just put him out there and let him try to wing it a little bit. That's really what they're doing, winging it. not good.
Yeah. So, I think we both alluded to it, but how do you see this game going on Sunday? I forget what the score I predicted was, but I had a pretty significant blowout.
Yeah. I picked 28-24 for the Saints. So closer than people imagine, or would envision a 4-point win
Jameis
for
Winston's
the
a guy that can be prone to mistakes, so if they can force some turnovers, then they can keep it close.
For sure. And I think, I think the Giants' offense has played reasonably well in terms of Daniel Jones playing well. Obviously, the points haven't been there, and he's shorthanded at receiver. But, I think eventually, Jones playing well is going to start to matter in terms of the production. Now, maybe 24 points is too much, but maybe I'm being a little too generous there at 28-24. I could see it being a blowout. I just don't. I think they're going to feel the loss of Blake Martinez in terms of what this defense is going to be able to do. But, you're right. Your only hope, if you're the Giants, I think, is that Jameis Winston has kind of a clunky game.
Yeah, I agree. And, you hope Daniel Jones, who has played pretty well, if he plays that well again, that it actually ends in touchdowns, because they're just not scoring enough. All right, we can wrap up on that note. We got to get back out to practice soon. As always, if you're not subscribed, make sure you do. We're on all the podcast apps, and we'll check back with you guys next week.